Within the pages of this transformative exploration, readers are welcomed into the intriguing world of personal magnetism, a subject that transcends the ordinary and beckons individuals into the realms of charisma, influence, and the subtle forces that shape human interactions. As the curtains rise with the preliminary greeting, the stage is set for a journey that delves into the art and science of harnessing one's magnetic potential. Chapter 1. Personal Magnetism. The journey commences with a comprehensive examination of the essence of personal magnetism. This foundational chapter lays the groundwork for understanding the elusive qualities that contribute to an individual's allure and impact. Readers are introduced to the core concepts that form the bedrock of personal magnetism, sparking a curiosity that will be nurtured and expanded upon in the chapters to follow. Chapter 2. Mental and Physical Poles. Building upon the introductory insights, the narrative seamlessly transitions into an exploration of the mental and physical poles that underpin personal magnetism. Here, the author unravels the intricate relationship between mental prowess and physical presence, providing readers with a nuanced understanding of the dual nature of their magnetic potential. Chapter 3. The Mental Phase. Diving deeper into the complexities, the focus shifts to the mental phase of personal magnetism. Readers are guided through the subtle dynamics of thought, perception, and mindset, unveiling the ways in which the mind becomes a powerful tool in the cultivation of magnetic charisma. Chapter 4. The Physical Phase. With a seamless flow, the exploration extends to the physical aspects of personal magnetism. This chapter unravels the mysteries of body language, gestures, and the physicality that accompanies magnetic presence. The author skillfully interweaves theory with practical applications, ensuring that readers not only comprehend the concepts but also begin to embody them. Chapter 5. Physical Magnetism. The journey intensifies as the narrative navigates into the specifics of physical magnetism. This chapter serves as a compass, guiding readers through the intricacies of physical allure, exploring how one's presence can captivate and influence those in their immediate sphere. Chapter 6. Generating Nerve Force. As the exploration advances, attention is turned towards the generation of nerve force, a vital element in the alchemy of personal magnetism. Here, readers are initiated into the ways in which energy is cultivated and harnessed to enhance their magnetic potential. Chapter 7. Distributing Nerve Force. The narrative gracefully unfolds into the art of distributing nerve force, revealing the significance of balance and flow in the magnetism equation. This chapter equips readers with the knowledge needed to navigate the dynamic interplay between internal energy and external influence. Chapter 8. Nerve Force Exercises. Practicality takes center stage as the author introduces nerve force exercises. Readers are provided with actionable techniques to refine and amplify their magnetic energy, ensuring that the theoretical foundations are translated into tangible, transformative practices. Chapter 9. Projecting Nerve Force. In the culminating chapter, the spotlight shines on the art of projecting nerve force. Readers are guided through the process of radiating their magnetic energy outward, influencing their surroundings and leaving an indelible mark on those they encounter. This final chapter solidifies the reader's journey, empowering them to become masters of their personal magnetism. In the unfolding chapters of this literary odyssey, readers will find not just a manual on personal magnetism, but a profound invitation to unlock the secrets of charisma, influence, and the extraordinary potential that resides within each individual. The canvas is set, and the brushstrokes of knowledge, practical wisdom, and transformative insights await those who embark on this captivating exploration. I take pleasure in presenting to many American students who will acquire possession of copies of this book these practical lessons on the art and science of personal magnetism. These chapters contain the gist of the lessons taught by me in classes and to individuals in my courses of personal instruction conducted by me here in Paris for the past 18 years. In my personal classwork, of course, I adapt the instruction to the special requirements of my individual students, which I cannot do in the case of general lessons in printed form. But notwithstanding this, I feel that I have condensed into these pages the essence of my methods and principles of practice, so that any student of average intelligence may readily grasp, assimilate, and apply the same with success, At least I feel that if the student does not accomplish this, it will be his or her own fault, not that of myself. In introducing this book, I wish to express my obligations to Mr. LND, an American student of mine here in Paris, who has kindly transformed my rather stilted guidebook English into the plain, simple form desirable for a book designed for the general public. I feel particularly indebted to him for supplying the idiomatic American man-on-the-street terms, thus reproducing the conversational style which I use in all my lessons in French, but which my book English rendered impossible in this case, without the kindly assistance of this worthy gentleman. With hand on heart, I send to my new American audience the sincere regards and most earnest wishes for success of their solicitous teacher, Theron Q. Dumont, Paris, France, August 26, 1913. 1. Chapter 1. Personal Magnetism. It is a strange and almost amusing fact that there should be at the same time, on the part of the general public, such a general acceptance of the existence of personal magnetism, on the one hand, and such an ignorance of the nature of this wonderful force, on the other hand. In short, while everyone believes in the existence of personal magnetism, scarcely anyone possesses knowledge of the real nature of the same, much less a working knowledge of its principles of application. A belief in the existence of a personal power, influence, or atmosphere, on the part of certain individuals, which enables the possessor to attract, influence, dominate, or control others, has been held by the race from the earliest days of written history. Many of the oldest writings of the race contain references to the strange, mysterious power possessed by certain individuals, which enabled them to attract or influence others. And following the course of written human history along the ages, we may perceive a constant reference to this strange power of the individual, so generally acknowledged and at the same time so little understood. Coming down to the present age, an age in which great attention has been devoted to the study of psychology and psychic subjects in general, we find that while the old belief in personal magnetism has been strengthened, there exists at the same time very little general knowledge among the public regarding the real nature of the force, or the best means of using and employing it. But this lack of knowledge just alluded to is confined to the general public. In all ages there have been a few advanced individuals who have thoroughly understood and employed the force of personal influence. Not only have the occult students of the past possessed this knowledge, and have passed it on to their successors, but many of the greatest men of history have acquired a thorough knowledge likewise, and have employed it in advancing their own interests. In some cases, individuals of this last-mentioned class have received direct instruction from occult teachers, but in many cases they have stumbled across the existence of the power within themselves, and then advanced in their knowledge of the subject by careful investigation and study, accompanied by constant experimentation. Many of them, in their writings or sayings, have testified to their knowledge in us of this most wonderful power. It is difficult even to correctly define the term personal magnetism, so little are its principles understood by the masses of the people. The dictionaries give us but little help in the matter, so vague are their so-called definitions. Perhaps the best definition is the following: the strong, peculiar, but little understood power, force, or influence exerted by certain individuals in varying degrees, by the means of which other persons are attracted to, controlled by, dominated, or influenced by the individual possessing the power. A form of mental influence exerted by certain individuals over those with whom they come in contact. The principal objection that I, personally, have to the above otherwise fairly good definition is it implies that only certain individuals possess personal magnetism, the implication being that the remainder of the race are devoid of it. This, in my opinion, is a sad mistake. The truth is, each and every individual is in possession of a certain degree of personal magnetism, that each person may increase the degree and strengthen the power by knowledge and practice. Even the most unmagnetic person possesses personal magnetism, perhaps even to a considerable degree, but is generally so ignorant of the nature of the force of the means of its employment that he or she actually repels other persons instead of attracting them. For do not fail to note this fact: personal magnetism, like material magnetism, may repel as well as attract. It has its positive as well as its negative side. Many very repellent persons are really manifesting a high degree of personal magnetism in a negative form, and are driving away persons from them in the same manner that others attract persons to them. It is all a matter of the use of the power. The fact is that every person generates and throws off a certain degree, varying among different individuals, of personal magnetism, which affects the minds of other persons coming within the field of its influence. Not only does each person emanate and project a certain amount or degree of personal magnetism, additionally, each person is also constantly surrounded by a field of personal magnetic influence, a personal atmosphere, so to speak. This personal atmosphere affects to a greater or lesser degree other persons coming within its field of influence. This personal atmosphere varies greatly in degree of strength, extent, and general character among different individuals. The average person has but a weak personal atmosphere, which extends but a short distance on all sides of him, while the strong characters of the race are surrounded by a widely spread personal atmosphere of great power, especially when they are aroused by any strong emotion, feeling, or desire. The personal atmosphere of those strong individuals, who are generally recognized as leaders of the race, usually extends great distances from the person and is fairly saturated with strong dynamic magnetism, which impresses itself strongly upon those coming within their field of influence. But even the weaker individuals of the race, or using personal magnetism unconsciously, exert at least some degree of influence upon those around them. It requires but a moment's thought to recognize that some persons emanate an atmosphere of good cheer, brightness, and happiness, which affects in a desirable way all persons with whom they come in contact. Others, in the same way, are surrounded by an atmosphere of gloom, pessimism, and discouragement, which adversely affects persons coming near them. These things are too common to even excite interest among the average persons, but in this phenomena may be found the key to the higher forms of personal magnetism. We are so accustomed to regarding personal magnetism as meaning only the positive, attractive phase, that it comes as a shock to some of us to be told that the repelling personal atmosphere is equally magnetic. That is, magnetic in the wrong direction. This should cause no wonder when we remember that even the physical metallic magnet repels under some circumstances as strongly as it attracts under others. There are, it is true, certain individuals who seem neither to attract nor repel, but this does not affect the general rule. These neutral individuals are usually of weak magnetism and weak character. That is to say, they have no strong motives, aims, or desires, or strong cast of character or personality. Each faculty of the mentality is neutralized by some other faculty of equal strength, and the result is a neutral condition akin to lukewarm water, neither hot nor cold. It follows naturally that such persons exert but a neutral influence, and have but a weak neutral personal atmosphere. They neither attract nor repel. They simply bore persons with whom they come in contact. Some may raise the question that if, as I have said, each and every person is possessed of personal magnetism, then why should anyone bother any more about the matter, or study the subject of personal magnetism at all? Such a question, and it is frequently raised for that matter, causes a smile to manifest on the features of those who have knowledge of the subject, so childish does it seem to them. While it is true that each and every person is possessed of personal magnetism to some degree, it is equally true that the majority of persons have but a weak magnetic force, and that often of a negative or undesirable character. And it is a fact positively known to those who have mastered the subject that even the weakest and most negative person may so develop his or her personal magnetism as to gradually acquire the same degree and character of magnetism as that possessed by many individuals, originally far in advance of them in magnetic influence. One may completely change the character of his personal magnetism from negative to positive, from undesirable to desirable, by careful study and practice along the lines which I shall lay down in this book. Moreover, it is possible for any person possessing sufficient will, perseverance, and determination to develop from a puny state of magnetism into a condition of giant magnetic powers. But this latter requires determination, constant practice until a certain stage is reached, and an indomitable will. While anyone may easily increase his or her degree of power of personal magnetism, and still more easily change the character of one's personal atmosphere, the higher prizes are reserved for those who will persevere to the end and continue faithful in the exercises. This, of course, is true not only of personal magnetism, but also of every other thing worth having. There is no royal road to anything worth having. We must work for what we get. The prizes are not for the weaklings and triflers, but for the persistent, earnest individuals who will hang on until they succeed. In this little book, I give you the key to the secret of personal magnetism, but it will still remain for you, yourselves, to determine just what degree of success you shall attain. I give you the best tools and instructions as to how to use them, but you will have to do the rest yourself. This I will say, however, success must and will be yours if you will follow the instructions carefully, persistently, and perseveringly. That is all I can do for you. The rest is in your own hands. Chapter 2. Mental and Physical Poles. Some of the writers on the subject of personal magnetism have fallen into the error of considering that the entire secret of personal magnetism is to be found in the phenomena of telepathy or transference of thought. These writers, however, have been so carried away by the wonderful facts of the mental phase of personal magnetism that they have entirely overlooked the other phase, that is, the physical pole of the magnetic personality. This second phase is just as important as is the mental phase, and the person who wishes to cultivate and develop personal magnetism must give this second phase the same careful attention and practice as the first phase. There are two distinct phases or poles of personal magnetism. 1, the mental, and 2, the physical. Do not fail to note this fact, for your success will depend upon the coordination of the force of both poles. To many, this idea of there being a second or physical phase of personal magnetism will seem strange. So accustomed have they grown to hearing the teachings that personal magnetism is a mental phenomenon, pure and simple. But as we proceed in our study of the subject in this book, I hope to thoroughly convince you that this second pole of personal magnetism really exists, and that it is equally potent as the first, or mental phase or pole. A man is a dual organism, with both mental and physical phases of manifestation, both mind and body. So is his personal force composed of two distinct phases or poles, each coordinating with the other in the work of manifesting energy and creating effects. Some persons have more mental magnetism, while others have more physical magnetism. But the individual who really manifests the highest degree of personal magnetism is the one who is developed along both poles of activity, both phases of magnetism, physical as well as mental. The mental pole or phase of personal magnetism depends for its force and energy upon the ability of the mind to create thought waves and to project them beyond the limits of the brain, into the personal atmosphere of the individual, and even beyond the range of his own personal atmosphere when necessary. When accompanied with the physical magnetism generated by the other pole of magnetic activity, this mental magnetism strongly affects other persons coming within the field of action of these thought waves. But without a good supply of the physical magnetism, these thought waves fail to have sufficient strength to produce marked results. It would seem that the physical magnetism were needed to give body to the mental magnetism, just as the mental magnetism is needed to give color, character, or soul to the physical magnetism. The two phases of magnetism must work together to gain the best effects. It was formerly very difficult to convey to the mind of the student the facts regarding the mental phase of personal magnetism. So strange did the whole thing appear to him. But in these days, when there has been so much written and taught regarding telepathy, thought transference, and mind power, the average person is so well posted on the general subject that he may readily understand the special features of thought power as manifested on personal magnetism. So it is not necessary now to first give the student a thorough education regarding the general subject of telepathy, in order to lead him up to the special subject of personal magnetism. In this book, I shall take it for granted that the student knows something of the subject of telepathy or thought transference, and accordingly I shall not take up space and time in traveling over this old familiar ground. But nevertheless, I think it advisable to point out to you some of the latest facts discovered by science in connection with the transference of thought. Science has discovered that the human brain, in the processes of thinking, actually generates and uses up a certain amount of energy in the area of the brain tissue. The generation and employment of this energy produces heat and actually increases the temperature of the brain areas, as may be proven by the use of the delicate registering instruments. Found in every well-equipped brain is as much an actual force as is electricity or the ordinary magnetism of the lodestone, and is governed by much the same general laws and rules, and like electricity or ordinary magnetism, it is not confined to the point at which it is generated, but instead it may be, and is, diffused to points beyond. In other words, the thought energy of the brain of a person extends beyond the limits of his brain, creates a thought atmosphere around him, and registers an effect upon the brains of others coming within his field of energy. The discovery of radioactivity in certain newly discovered elements of matter, notably in the case of radium, has led science to investigate the matter of the possible radioactivity of other substances. The result is most surprising, for advanced science now announces that every substance is radioactive. That is, every substance is constantly radiating energy of force from itself. This discovery serves to harmonize the previously separated facts regarding thought transference, etc., and it is now accepted as a fact that the human brain is strongly radioactive and is constantly sending forth streams of radio energy. The same laws which govern the radium are now perceived to govern the brain action. This simplifies the matter and brings the subject of thought transference into the general field of science and out of the realms of mysticism. The subject is now taught and studied on a scientific basis in the principal universities of the world, and new discoveries are constantly being made regarding it. The physical pole of personal magnetism is not to be found in the flesh, blood, or bones of the body, for these are but the crude machinery by which the higher parts of the human organism moves and acts. Instead, it is to be found in that most wonderful part, or parts of the organism, known as the nervous system. This nervous system is just as wonderful in its way as is the brain, and its effects in personal magnetism are just as important. We are so apt to think of the nerves as being a part of the body of the person that it is somewhat difficult for us to get the idea that the nervous system is really as much a part of the mental system as is the brain. In fact, the nervous system is composed of almost exactly the same kind of matter as is the brain. The nervous system, moreover, generates energy of a kind very similar to that generated by the brain. For that matter, advanced science really considers that the brain and nervous system are but parts of one and the same thing, governed by the same general laws, and to be considered in connection with each other. And the student of personal magnetism soon comes to accept this view, when he sees the important part played by the great nerve centers in the work of personal magnetism. Therefore, although I call the magnetism of the nervous system by the term physical, and that of the brain by the term mental, I do so merely in order to make an easy line of distinction for the purpose of teaching and study. At the last, however, they are really but parts of one and the same thing, merely two poles of the same source of energy. The nervous system of the human being is really a most intricate mechanism. Its main feature is the spinal cord, which runs along an opening in the spinal column or backbone, and which is directly connected with the brain matter in the skull. From the spinal cord emerge many sets of nerves in pairs, which branch out in smaller filament, these in turn branching out into still smaller, and so on, until each and every part of the body is supplied with a direct connection with the main nerve trunk. Other great cables of nerves descend into the trunk of the body, apart from the spinal cord system, although connected with the latter by nerve links. In different parts of the body are to be found great masses of nerve substance, being matted knots or tangles of nerves, these centers being called plexus or plexuses, the principal one being the solar plexus, which is situated right back of the pit of the stomach, and which plays a very important part in the life of the person, so important indeed that a severe blow struck directly over it may cause the death of the person. The nervous system not only conveys messages from the different parts of the body to the brain, but also serves to convey the energy of motion to the various parts. In short, there can be no motion of any part of the body unless the impulse comes over the nerves. When the nerves governing any part of the body are paralyzed, that part of the body becomes devoid of motion. So you see, the nervous system is a part of the great energy-producing system of the body, as much a part of it as is the brain. Remember this always, for it is one of the keys to the secrets of personal magnetism. When you remember that this nerve energy spreads itself beyond the limits of the body, just as does the energy of the brain, then you may begin to see what I am driving at in announcing the second pole or phase of personal magnetism, namely the physical pole, which in reality is the phase of magnetism generated and radiated by the nervous system, particularly by its great centers of plexus. I think that you are now beginning to get the idea, although I have carefully avoided technical scientific terms and have expressed myself in the simplest form. Chapter 3. The Mental Phase. The mental phase of personal magnetism depends upon two coordinated manifestations of mental power, as follows. 1. The holding of certain mental states until the mental atmosphere becomes charged with the vibrations of the particular mental states, and 2. The conscious projection of the mental current from the brain centers by the action of the will of the individual. I shall now proceed to describe these two mental phases of manifestation in detail. It is a fact known to all students of the subject that the character of the mental atmosphere of any individual depends entirely upon the character of the mental states held by him. The mental atmosphere of the hopeful, expectant individual is composed of vibrations of a hopeful, cheerful character, which tend to impress and affect other persons coming within the field of activity of his personal atmosphere. Likewise, the mental atmosphere of the gloomy, depressed individual is composed of vibrations of a gloomy, depressing character, which impresses and affects individuals coming in contact therewith. And in the same manner, all of one's mental states will become manifest in his mental atmosphere, and accordingly will affect those with whom he comes in close contact. The truth of the above statements will become apparent to anyone who will give the matter a moment's careful consideration, remembering at the same time the impressions created upon him when he has come in contact with different individuals. He will remember that some individuals have left upon him the impression of gloom, inefficiency, failure, etc. Others have left with him a feeling of suspicion, distrust, and uneasiness. Others still have given him the impression of cheerfulness, friendliness, confidence, and goodwill. The atmosphere of some persons is such that it causes us to let them alone, and to take no stock whatsoever in their business propositions. Others instead imbue us with confidence and trust, and give us the feeling that we would like to do business with them. Some persons leave upon us the impressions that we have been in the presence of a snaky thing, and we often can scarcely repress a shudder of disgust and dislike, while others create in us the impression that the other person is a good friend and can be depended upon as a helper and comrade. Why, it is not from anything these persons have said, for as we all know, some of the slipperiest persons are often the best and smoothest talkers, and some of the best and most dependable persons are often very reticent and even short in speech. The reason lies deeper than words. It is the feeling that we experience when we come in contact with persons rather than any report of the reason regarding them, and this feeling is caused by the registry upon our sensitive brain organism of the thought to vibrations of the other person's personal atmosphere. Not only are these things noticed in the person himself or herself, but even the very residences, stores, or other places frequented by the individual are also affected by the continuous influence of the thought vibrations of his or her personal atmosphere. Did you ever notice how some houses produce upon you a feeling of sadness or woe, or worse, while others seem to carry within them an air of health and good cheer, happiness and content? This is often true although the house may have been unoccupied for some time. So strong do the mental vibrations of the atmosphere of the person or persons formerly inhabiting them. In the same way, some offices and places of business are so saturated with the vibrations of the personal atmospheres of their occupants that one is forcibly impressed by the same upon entering the door. A man may disguise his thoughts by his words or his facial expression, but the mental vibrations of his personal atmosphere will frequently give him away. These are facts which should require no further proof. Your own experience should be proof enough to satisfy you, but you should make mental note of this fact and carry it in mind as we proceed. Many persons leave but little impression upon us, for the reasons that their mental states are so varied, inconstant, and fleeting that they neutralize each other, and fail to impart a definite shade of thought color to the personal atmosphere. The strongest personal atmospheres are those of persons of strong feelings, desires, and emotions, good or bad, for such have strong and constant mental states which impress themselves forcibly upon their personal atmosphere, so strongly in fact that one who notices these things cannot fail to perceive them. A moment's thought will inform you that if these things be true, and true you will realize they must be when you give the matter a moment's careful thought, then one should be very careful to avoid harboring mental states of a character likely to inspire undesirable feelings in other persons, and at the same time, one should endeavor to cultivate mental states of a character likely to awaken feelings of a desirable character in those with whom we come in contact. In fact, a great portion of the following chapters will be used to teach how to cultivate just such mental states so as to rate the desired effect upon others. For in this lies one of the great secrets of personal magnetism. One need not despair if he has been creating and carrying around with him a personal atmosphere of an undesirable kind, for these things may be remedied, and one may entirely change the character of his mental states, and thus transform his personal atmosphere from the very worst to the very best. These things require work, perseverance, and patience, it is true, but the reward is so great that it pays anyone to devote his attentions and time to it. The principle is very simple indeed, but it requires determination and dogged will to obtain the best results, particularly in cases where very undesirable conditions have existed. The second way in which the mental phase of personal magnetism operates, that is, that of the conscious projection of the mental currents from the brain centers, by the action of the will of the individual, also demands work on the part of the student who wish to create a strong personal atmosphere. The principle of this second form of mental action consists in the use of the will in a conscious projection of thought currents. This is true in the case of stimulating the personal atmosphere, and also in cases in which one endeavors to produce an effect upon the mind of some other person in whose presence he may happen to be. While it is true that the character of the mental states of the person will color and give character to his personal atmosphere, which will of course produce an effect upon the other person or persons in his field of action, it is likewise true that the effect of such mental vibrations may be enormously increased by the use of the will in the direction of the conscious projection just referred to. The mental states produce and create the mental atmosphere, it is true, but the will serves to project them forth with force, and to generally energize the atmosphere and increase the effect. It is just as if you had created a great store of mental magnetism in your brain, and given it the proper quality and color by the character of your mental states. This would naturally create a personal atmosphere or aura around you, which would be felt by others. But then imagine the increased strength and effect that would arise from the use of your will to project and force outward from your brain these mental vibrations. You will see at once how such an action of the will would tend to energize and increase the vibrations of your mental atmosphere, can you not? It would be like turning on an extra force of the power, would it not? Certainly it would, and you may gain this effect whenever you wish to do so, by using the methods, which will be given you in this book as we proceed. Again, you will see by a little thought how much stronger will be the effect upon any special individual, if, in addition to the vibrations of our personal atmosphere, we add the force of a special current of mental force directed steadily and pointedly at his mind by an effort of our will. Do you see the point? You first affect him by the effect of your energized personal atmosphere, and then just when he is in the proper receptive condition, you discharge at him a psychic rifle ball which hits him right in the bull's eye of his mind with enormous force. At first thought, this may seem to you like very strenuous proceedings, and one which would require the outlay of a great amount of willpower on your own part. But this is not so, for the thought currents are very responsive to the action of the will, and the main thing is to hold the will firmly to the task, and the thought currents will flow out over the channel thus made for them. It is like holding a rifle properly aimed, and then letting the force of the powder drive the bullet home, or again, like holding the nozzle of a hose pointed exactly where you wish the current of water to go. And lo, when the water is turned on, it flies straight to the mark, long after it has left the tip of the nozzle of the hose. The strong men of all times have employed the will in this way in the direction of creating a strong personal atmosphere, and also in the direction of producing strong impressions upon those who they wish to affect. In many cases, they have not fully understood the character of the forces set into operation by themselves, but they understood the how part, even if they did not grasp the why. The next time you come into contact with a strong individual, watch him or her, and see if you cannot almost see the operation of this direction of mental force of which I have just spoken. But far more important than even studying others is that of cultivating the art of doing the thing for yourself, and this is what I am trying to teach you to do, and you will succeed in it too if you will enter into the work fully with heart and mind. Get in earnest about it, and the power will develop in you to bring about success. Chapter 4. The physical phase. The physical phase of personal magnetism depends upon two coordinated manifestations of nerve force, as follows. 1. The generation within the nervous system of a plenteous supply of nerve force, and 2. The conscious projection by the will of that supply of nerve force into the personal atmosphere, and even to a greater distance under special conditions. By nerve force, as used in the above paragraph, I mean that strange, mysterious form of energy, which controls all physical movements, and yet at the same time appears to be something higher than physical itself. It is akin to electricity or magnetism in its real nature, and like these forces is impossible to define. Nerve force is something far different from the matter of which the nervous system is composed. The nervous system from spinal cord to the most delicate nerve filament is at the best but a system of wires, relays, etc., over which the nerve force travels, or else complicated reservoirs in which the nerve force is stored. The ordinary nerves serve as wires and cables over which the nerve force travels to move the parts of the body, which we will to move, or which our subconscious mentality desires to move. Certain parts of the brain are great reservoirs of nerve force, as are also the great groups of nerve matter called the plexus, prominent among which are the solar plexus and the sacral plexus. The ordinary textbooks of physiology pass over the question of the real nature of nerve force, for their writers do not possess the secret. They dispose of the question by saying, as in the case of electricity, while we fully recognize its existence and its power, nevertheless we do not know its real nature. And so the student must go back to some of the old occult writers of the past ages and their followers in the present age in order to get the secret. All occultists, ancient and modern, have recognized the existence of a mighty subtle force of nature, one of nature's finer forces, which is most potent at its effects and activities, but which nevertheless defied all power of analysis or definition. The reason that science has never been able to classify nerve force is because, like electricity, it is in a class by itself, and is different from any other form of force, so different that it cannot be classified with other forces. Science, in some cases, has endeavored to treat it as a secretion of the nervous matter, but that is a folly akin to that of the materialistic philosopher who tried to define mind as a secretion of the brain, just as the bile is a secretion of the liver, the gall a secretion of the gallbladder, etc. Such attempts at definition cause only a smile on the face of the wise. The occultists, on the contrary, while not attempting to define nerve force, recognizing it to be in a class of its own, nevertheless have discovered the source of its origin, and have given us valuable information as to its use. They have given it many names, as for instance, vital force, vital energy, life force, vital fluid, vital magnetism, etc. And in the case of the Orientals, the terms prana or akashic energy have been applied to it. But under all of these different names, the occultists have always meant the one and same thing, that is, nerve force. The name I use in describing it, nerve force, is employed simply because it is found specialized in the nervous system, and not because of any idea that it originates there. Indeed, as you shall see in a moment, it has a far higher and more elementary source of origin. The old materialistic school of physiology has attempted to show that nerve force, like the bodily material, is derived from the food we eat and is created by chemical combustion of the latter. This, however, is only partly true. While it is true that there is a certain amount of nerve force in fresh food, having been gathered there during the life of the plant or animal of which the food formed a part, and while it is true that a certain amount of this nerve force is taken up by the system of the person eating the food, particularly if the food be fresh, nevertheless the amount of nerve force so absorbed is comparatively small and is far too little to supply what is needed by the individual to run his physical organism. And even the small part so obtained is not derived from the chemical combustion of the food. Food chemical combustion results in giving bodily heat, but never in creating nerve force. The true source of nerve force is the same as the source of electricity, namely the universal ether that fills space. Like electricity also, this force is available to human wants only when it is associated with. The atmosphere is charged with nerve force, which is taken up and absorbed by the nervous system, and stored away in its great reservoirs, from whence in turn it flows over the nerves when required by the physical or mental needs of the individual. But you naturally ask, how does the body absorb the universal nerve force? Through what channel does it enter the system? The answer is plain, viz., in plant, animal, and human life, the nerve force is breathed into the system. In other words, the process of breathing in its higher and lower forms is not alone that of extracting oxygen or other elements from the air, but also that of extracting the universal nerve force at the same time. When this is understood, it will be more easily understood why the living thing perishes so soon if the process of breathing be interfered with. The understanding of this secret of nature throws a much-needed light upon the important part played by breathing in the life of all creatures. Before proceeding to a further consideration of the process of the absorption of nerve force from the atmosphere, especially in the case of the student of personal magnetism, I ask you to consider another important question in relation to the physical phase of personal magnetism, namely, that of the projection of nerve force beyond the limits of the nervous system. You will remember that the average physiologist maintains that it is folly to hold that nerve force can possibly pass beyond the limits of the nervous system containing it. He holds that, like electricity on the wires, it cannot pass except over the wires of the nerves. But is this true even of electricity? I positively assert that it is not. The veriest novice in the study of electricity is aware that electricity will often leap from one conducting substance to another, jumping the gap in the shape of a spark, and then flying along the new channel. Again, even without the spark, electricity and magnetism will often affect other substances by what is known as induction, without the actual contact of the two conducting materials. This is so common that it is a wonder that the question is ever raised, and what is true of electricity and magnetism in this respect is likewise true of nerve force, for it will not only often leap over the barriers of the nervous system, but will and constantly does affect other nervous systems by a kind of induction. Not only is the phenomena of personal magnetism a proof of this transmission of nerve force, but the phenomena of human magnetism, as it has been called, in the direction of magnetic healing another proof. A proof, moreover, that may be obtained by any individual in his own experience. Moreover, the experience of every individual will bear ample and generous testimony to the fact that certain persons, flowing over with vigorous nerve force, will so radiate the energy that it is actually perceptible to those shaking hands with them, or even coming into their vicinity. These individuals fairly radiate health and vigor, and exert a positive healing and invigorating effect on those with whom they come in contact. In a similar manner is manifested a lack of sufficient nerve force by those unfortunate individuals who go around unconsciously absorbing the nerve force of others, and in extreme cases becoming actual vampires sucking the vital forces from those around them. Who of you have not met this last class of persons, and have not noted how depressed and weakened one is after having been in the company of such persons for some time? The average person does not need any further proof in this case, beyond that afforded by his or her own experience. It may be asked that if the nerve force is inherent in the universal ether and obtained from the atmosphere, why all persons are not equally endowed with this energy. The answer is that the life habits of individuals differ, and just as one is physically strong and robust and another weak and delicate, so is one individual strong in nerve force and another weak in it. Moreover, a change in the life habits of the person will inevitably result in a change in the amount of nerve force absorbed and retained by him or her. In fact, one of the purposes of this book is to instruct you how you may increase the nerve force within yourself. While the object is the increase of your personal magnetism, you will find that at the same time your general health and vigor will improve. In addition to the amount of nerve force being determined by the life habits of the individual, it is also true that the individual may, by the proper exercises, so energize his nervous system that he will largely increase the degree of activity of his nerve force and may render it far more available for his requirements. It isn't only a question of securing a plenteous supply of nerve force, but also of having the same in an active condition, and in such a form that it may be readily available for the requirements of everyday life. Chapter 5. Physical Magnetism. You will remember that when you have come in contact with any of the strong characters in any walk of life, the great preachers, lawyers, statesmen, orators, businessmen, etc., those whose success depends upon the strong effect they produce upon other persons, You have been conscious of a feeling that they radiate strength and power. You actually felt the power coming from them. And you will also remember that this power did not seem to you to be mental power or intellectual strength alone. It seemed instead to have much of the physical in it. So strong is this power in the case of some of the world's great characters that they seem to be personified willpower, mighty centers of vitalized energy, affecting all with whom they come in contact. In order to realize the difference between this power and pure intellectual strength and ability, you have but to remember another class of gifted persons, namely, the great students, writers, etc., and other men who have developed great intellectual power. These men as a rule are not magnetic, as the term is generally used. They do not radiate or throw off force, and the element of physical magnetism is almost entirely absent. They seem to be centers of great intellectual energy, but nothing more. I am not now speaking of individuals in whom both the intellectual and the physical are well balanced and combined, but instead of those individuals who are distinctly mental or intellectual. A moment's thought will recall many examples of the type to which I refer: the teachers, preachers, lawyers, and students whose intellectuality is well developed, but who lack that something which impresses persons. Another appeal to your memory will show you also that the magnetic person is almost always possessed of that indefinable something which we call strength and energy. He may not be a stout, large person. He may even be a scrawny, lank individual, of slight frame and small stature. But even in the last case he will be wiry, and like a coiled wire spring, full of latent energy. The magnetic person is never the weak, flabby jellyfish type. I have seen these thin, magnetic persons on their deathbeds, weakened by disease, but even in their last moments they gave one the impression of keen, spring-like strength. The other type of magnetic person, the stout type, also gives the impression of power and strength, a something within which stores and radiates strength and power. Is this not so in your own experience? Did you ever see a great leader, a magnetic personality, who did not convey the idea of strength in the physical sense? I think not. Now remember that I am not claiming that physical nerve force alone constitutes personal magnetism. Far from this, there are many men who possess and radiate physical nerve force who are not personally magnetic in the full sense of the term. The combination of mental magnetism and physical magnetism is needed to produce the full phenomenon of personal magnetism, remember. But I do insist that mental magnetism without its physical counterpart is like a mind with a body. It lacks substance and effectiveness. The occultists inform us that in the personal atmosphere of the individual, his aura, they call it, there is to be found not only the vibrations of his mental states and character, but also the vibrations of his physical magnetism, or nerve force, as I have called it in this book. They state that to those who have developed psychic or clairvoyant power, these nerve force vibrations may be seen extending from the body some 2 or 3 feet in either direction, the whole aura having an egg shape, hence its name. It is said to have a faint violet color, something like a pale electric flame, and to quiver and vibrate in a manner similar to the motions of heated air arising from a stove or the ground on a hot summer day, so familiar to every observer. They also claim that when a strong person is using his will, this nerve force, carrying with it his mental magnetism, may be seen shooting in great sheets or flashes from him to the other person or persons. I do not claim to possess this psychic vision myself, but the testimony of many of my psychic friends agree in this matter, and are in accord with the writing of the older occultists. And at any rate, anyone experimenting with personal magnetism will be convinced that nerve force or physical magnetism does act in just the way described, though it remains unseen by the eye of the ordinary person. Another important bit of information furnished by the occultists, which is fully verified by my own observations and experiments, and which in fact forms one of the foundation pillars of my system of personal magnetism, is that concerning the part played by nerve force in the phenomena of telepathy, hypnotism, mental influence, and similar phenomena in which the mind of one person acts upon the mind of another, this of course being one of the main features of personal magnetism. I allude to what may be called the vitalizing of the thought waves by the current of nerve force, which is projected at the same time with it. Thought waves unaccompanied by currents of nerve force lack force and effect, and are like cold mental power devoid of life and activity. You will grasp this idea better by reference to a common occurrence. For instance, you have heard many a sermon, speech, or recitation delivered by a person having marked intellectual ability and filled with good sound thoughts. And yet the delivery seemed dead, dull, colorless, and lifeless, did it not? It lacked the life, vigor, and vim of the delivery of some other speaker of even less intellectual power, did it not? And you have noticed that the personality of some admittedly intellectual personage lacked life, while some other less gifted personality fairly radiated life and strength, and consequently, magnetic power. Well, this represents the difference between plain thought waves and thought waves accompanied by strong nerve force. The one lacks body and vitalizing force, while the other possesses this in abundance. Think over this carefully until you get it, for in it lays one of the two great secrets of personal magnetism. A person in whom nerve force is actively present and who has consciously or unconsciously acquired the art of combining it with his thought waves will send forth words or thoughts fairly charged with dynamic force, reaching and affecting those with whom they come in contact. Like a high-power explosive shell, the nerve force drives the thought wave like a bullet to this mark, hitting the bull's-eye with a tremendous impact, and making a powerful impression on the mind of the other person or persons. There are persons whose words seem fairly alive, so vital is their action upon the minds of others. These persons have strongly active nerve force or physical magnetism used in connection with their mental currents. They flash out this combined force toward their audiences of many persons, and the latter are fairly lifted off their feet by the power. The great leaders of men have had this nerve force largely developed and actively employed. When they spoke, the other persons were almost compelled to do the bidding of the strong person. Julius Caesar and Napoleon Bonaparte were two marked examples of the use of this power. But as a fact, every man who sways, moves, and rules other persons is an example worthy of study. The student should, if possible, manage to be thrown in contact with this class of persons so that he may see, or rather feel for himself, the effect of this mighty force emanating from these individuals. He will then better realize just what part nerve force plays in the matter of personal influence and personal magnetism, and then be more firmly resolved to develop it in himself or herself. There are some persons who seem naturally to absorb, store up, and effectively use their nerve force of physical magnetism. Such are very fortunate, for they are saved the trouble of cultivating the processes referred to. But those who do not possess this gift naturally may by practice and perseverance develop it in themselves. Nay, more, they may eventually even surpass the naturally gifted man, for the latter does not understand the source or nature of his power, and is apt to neglect or abuse it, while the person who develops it in himself, according to rule and with a full understanding, has the thing on tap, as it were, and can always recuperate from an overdrain on a nervous system. Knowledge is power, and a cultivated and developed faculty is often far more effective than a similar faculty present at birth and not understood or worked for. Beginning with the next chapter, I purpose giving you plain, simple directions for the increase of your nerve force, the storing up of the same, and the conscious projection of it to vitalize your mental currents. The process is quite natural and does not partake of any mystic ceremonies or anything of that sort. It is based on purely physiological principles and is in full accord with natural laws. When you have once acquired the art and science of the absorption and storing of nerve force, you will be surprised that you have never thought of it before. When you acquire this power, you will be conscious of being a center of an enormous energy, and will also be made aware of your power by the effect upon other persons. Not only in the matter of personal magnetism, I mean, but also in the matter of imparting the vibrations of strength and energy. You will notice that other persons will be conscious of something in your handshake and touch that will surprise them. They will not understand just what affects them, but they will be conscious of some strange feeling pervading them. The best plan will be for you to keep your secret to yourself, and to avoid any impression of being out of the ordinary. You wish to create confidence, not fear, and the strange and mysterious causes fear rather than confidence. So keep your own secrets. Chapter 6. Generating Nerve Force. By reference to the first paragraph of Chapter 4, you will see that I have separated the physical phase of mental magnetism into two coordinated manifestations, the first of which, that is, the generation within the nervous system of a plenteous supply of nerve force, I shall now describe. The word generation in this connection only imperfectly conveys the idea of the actual process of acquiring nerve force within the nervous system, for the process is one of absorption and distribution rather than one of generation. But as the latter term conveys a simpler picture of the process, I have thought well to use it in this connection, particularly as many of the old occult writers have used it in this sense before my time. This process of nerve force generation may be said to consist of two distinct yet coordinated phases, viz. 1. The absorption of an extra amount of nerve force from the atmosphere by special forms of breathing, and 2. The distribution of the same to the great centers of the nervous system, which act as reservoirs of nerve force. I shall now proceed to consider these two respective phases in their proper order. The first phase of nerve force generation consists of the absorption of an extra supply of nerve force from the atmosphere by means of special forms of breathing. All persons constantly absorb nerve force from the atmosphere in the ordinary process of breathing, the amount differing with the individual, or rather with his habits of breathing. You will have noticed that the vigorous, strong individual nearly always breathes fully, that is, deeply and regularly, while the weak person will breathe only partially and irregularly. There is a very close connection between full, regular breathing and general physical health and strength, but I shall not touch upon this phase of the subject here, for it forms no part of this special instruction. I merely drop a hint which the wise will take advantage of. Without wishing to lead you into the subtleties of Oriental psychology, with its complicated forms of breathing for psychic and spiritual development, etc., I must call your attention at this point to the philosophy underlying some of the Oriental breathing practices, for the same is based on the soundest scientific principles. The Oriental philosophy teaches that each mental and physical state of the individual is represented by a special rhythm of breath, the rhythm and condition always being found together. The mental or physical condition will invariably manifest the particular rhythm of breath which belongs to it, and likewise, and this is one of the occult secrets, the deliberate assumption of a particular rhythm of breath will speedily result in the manifestation of the appropriate physical or mental condition. You have but to consider the subject for a moment, to see that when you are frightened or angry, you breathe with a different rhythm than when you are calm and peaceful. Each emotion, up and down the scale, has its own appropriate rhythm of breath, which invariably manifests at the same time. Moreover, different physical conditions likewise manifest in coordinated breath rhythms. Keep a close watch on yourself and those around you, and you will soon see that the above statements of facts are strictly correct. You will wonder why you never noticed the phenomena before. A little less known even is the correlated fact that the deliberate assumption or acting out of the particular breath rhythm related to a particular emotion will result in a speedy experiencing of the emotion itself. This also may be tested out on yourself. You will find that a few moments anger breath or fear breath, if well acted out or assumed faithfully, will result in you soon experiencing a feeling of anger or fear, as the case may be. Likewise, you will find that the deliberate assumption on your part of the breath rhythm of peace, calm, self-control will be sufficient to induce that particular state of feeling in you. There's a big hint in this last sentence, by the way, for that is exactly what the Oriental sages do to induce and maintain the mental state of philosophic calm for which they are noted. In this connection, let us remind you that when you are endeavoring to control your temper and to maintain your pose under extreme provocation, you will find that you instinctively strive to control your breath rhythm, which shows a marked tendency to fly off into a state of rapid panting and gasping. And, so long as you can maintain your steady, controlled rhythm of breath, you will maintain your poise and self-control. Well, to make a long story short, to get right down to the gist of the subject of the absorption of nerve force through controlled breath rhythm, let me say to you, 1. That there is a breath rhythm which nature uses to restore nerve force to the depleted system after a great demand upon it in the direction of either a strong mental or emotional strain, or after a severe physical strain, and 2. That a deliberate assumption or acting out of this particular breath rhythm will result in your being able to quickly absorb a greatly increased supply of nerve force for the purpose of use in personal magnetism, to render you full of physical magnetism, in fact. Do you catch this point? If not, reread the above paragraph several times until you fully grasp the importance of the statements therein contained, for they comprise exactly on half of the philosophy of nerve force generation, and much more besides if you are able to grasp it. You naturally ask at this point, what is this particular breath rhythm which nature uses to aid us in recuperating, and which nature uses to aid using recuperating, and which may be assumed with such wonderful result? Very well, let me answer you by asking you another question, namely, how do you breathe when you begin to recuperate just after a severe emotional, mental, or physical strain, when the characteristic first panting breath quiets down? If you will consider carefully, you will answer that you generally begin by 1 or 2 long, drawn-out sighing breaths, followed by a period of calm, deliberate, slow, deep breaths. You may not have noticed it, but these last calm, deep breaths are marked by a slow but regular rhythm, as regular indeed as the slow swing of the pendulum of a large clock, or the accompanying tick thereof. You will find that this slow, regular rhythmic breath continues for some little time, until you feel refreshed and reinvigorated, when the breath will drop into the normal, everyday rhythm, and the task is over. Well, this is exactly the breath rhythm, which, if properly assumed and well acted out, will result in drawing to you a greatly increased supply of nerve force from the universal storehouse of the same, that is, the atmosphere around you. I ask you, student, to pause at his point and reread the preceding paragraph. Consider it carefully, roll it over in our mind until you fully grasp its tremendous significance and fully make it your own thought. For in those few lines is condensed a statement of wonderful truth, which, if taken advantage of, will transform you into a very giant of physical magnetism. Do not proceed with this reading until you have fully grasped the importance of the information just given you. But do not imagine that you can jump at once into this great power. You must first gradually acquire the exact rhythm for yourself, for I can do no more than to indicate it to you. I cannot say, breathe in just so many seconds, hold the breath just so many, and then breathe out just so many, and so on, as many teachers have done, some who should have known better for that matter. For each person has his or her own particular breath rhythm of this kind, the difference arising from mental or physical formation and characteristics. The following is the rule, the only rule, in this matter. Ascertain first the precise breath rhythm which nature has given you for use in moments of recuperation after extreme mental, emotional, or physical strain. And then second, practice the same voluntarily by assuming or acting out the mental and physical conditions producing it, until the rhythm becomes fixed in your memory, so that you can easily reproduce it, instinctively, when you wish. Read this rule over until you thoroughly understand it. You will find it somewhat difficult to assume or act out the conditions producing the rhythm at first, unless you happen to be a natural or well-trained actor. But keep trying until you master it. Practice will make perfect, in this as in everything else, remember. Mentally place yourself in the same vibrations as when you were under some great strain of mind, emotion, or body in the past, and you will find that the same will be followed by an acting out of the period of recuperation, with its accompaniment of appropriate breath rhythm. Each student will manage this in his or her own way, and will get the result if persistent, persevering effort were made. You will find that the first indication of the recuperating breath rhythm will usually be a long drawn-out sigh, followed by a moment of rest, which in turn is followed by an easy, though deep, slow, deliberate succession of in-breathing and out-breathing, in perfect rhythm, which will be accompanied by a feeling of increased strength and vitality of mind and body. Delighted to experience is the feeling of relief and fresh vigor, vitality and vim, which results from this breath rhythm. In practicing this recuperative breath rhythm for the purpose of resting, gaining strength, or increasing your store of nerve force, do not fall into the too common error of artificial rhythmic breathing. Do not make the mistake of trying to count the seconds of the breath, or to make the breaths extend neither over a particular time nor to exactly match each other, or to retain the breath any special time, nor to count time between breaths, or anything of that kid. Forget all about the artificial standards, and give yourself up entirely to a peaceful, calm feeling of relief and recuperation, which nature will bestow upon you if you will create the right conditions for the manifesting of her power. Do not be artificial. Trust nature to run the thing aright, and leave everything in her hands. Do not bother at this point to wonder just how many times a day you must practice this exercise in order to gain physical magnetism and absorb nerve force. That point will be covered in a latter chapter, in connection with the accompanying process of nerve force distribution. The sole thing before you now is to learn how to produce this breath rhythm, and to practice until you can produce it at will, easily and naturally, without effort or strain, instinctively in fact. Until you accomplish this, there is no use of your bothering yourself about the succeeding stages. And now a word about practicing this step. Do not overdo the thing. Make haste slowly. It is a matter of growth and development with you, and you should not try to rush things too rapidly. Let nature proceed to make the process instinctive, and do not fall into the mistake of pulling up the roots of our plant in order to see whether it has grown overnight. It will grow. Never fear. You will know when you are on the right track and will be aware of your progress by reason of your increasing sense of vigor, vitality, and vim. Remember finally that the secret of the whole, this is that you have discovered how nature recuperates the system in times of extreme necessity, and have then learned how to draw upon this sources of energy at will, thereby increasing the supply far above the ordinary. It is just as if you had discovered a bottle containing the elixir of energy which kind Mother Nature uses to recuperate you in times of need, and then you had learned that you could partake of the elixir daily or whenever you felt like it, and were consequently enabled to increase your energy and vitality far above the average. The comparison or figure of speech is not exaggerated, for in this secret you have indeed discovered the elixir of vitality, vigor, and vim. That is, if you use it aright. Chapter 7. Distributing nerve force. In the preceding chapter, I have given you general instructions regarding the first phase of nerve force by means of certain forms of rhythmic breathing. I now proceed to the general instruction regarding the second phase of nerve force generation, namely, the distribution of the absorbed nerve force to the nervous system, and particularly to the great reservoirs of nerve force. This process of nerve force distribution naturally follows directly after that of nerve force absorption, the two being coordinated phases of one of nature's recuperative processes. Just as is the process of the recuperative breath rhythm, nature's way of restoring to the system a fresh supply of nerve force to replace that used in the extraordinary mental, emotional, or physical strain preceding it, so is the process of nerve force absorption another, or twin method of nature to distribute the absorbed nerve force to all parts of the body, strengthening and invigorating, vitalizing and stimulating each and every part of the body, and at the same time storing up in the great reservoirs of the nervous system a reserve supply of nerve force for times of future need. Again you ask, what is nature's way of distributing the absorbed nerve force as above stated, which also is the way in which you state students of personal magnetism may distribute their absorbed nerve force or physical magnetism? As in the case of the previous question, I answer, go to nature herself and discover her method. Let us then do so. Investigating nature's method of distributing physical magnetism or nerve force, what do we find nature doing just after the person is exhausted by mental, emotional, or physical exertion, that is, in addition to the peculiar breath rhythm? Answer, we find, accompanying the long, deep sigh preceding the breath rhythm, and also, following the rhythmic breathing, a tendency to stretch the muscles of the body. Not only do we notice this phenomenon at such times, but also it is to be observed when we awaken in the morning with a yawn, followed by an instinctive stretching of the muscles. We observe the same thing after we have used up nerve force in listening, reading, studying, etc. In fact, in any action which has required concentrated attention. It is always the yawn, the deep sigh, the measured breath, and finally the stretching of the muscles. Now do not dismiss this matter with a trifling jest or an amused smile, for this stretching of the muscles is one of nature's most important offices. It is nature's own favorite way of distributing to all parts of the body the nerve force being absorbed into the system. It is nature's own way of sending a vitalizing and invigorating current to the places in which it is needed. And moreover, if we will take her seriously, examine the meaning of her process, and then intelligently apply the same in our work of developing physical magnetism, we will have gained an important secret of nature, and one which we will not be willing to part with. In the first place, this stretching is something far more than a manifestation of laziness, weariness, or fatigue. It is an instinctive action resulting from nature's recognition of the need of a fresh supply of nerve force, and her rush to supply the needed energy. Do not mistake and confuse causes and effects in this matter. You will notice in cases of complete stretching a twofold motion, viz. 1, an extensions, and 2, a tensing or contraction of the muscles in the direction of drawing in the extended limbs or parts of the body. Now note this, both of these motions are forms of tensing or contracting the muscles. The extension movements result from the tension or contracting of the opposite set of muscles. The principal muscles of the body are arranged in opposing sets, one being used to push out, and the other to draw in the limb or portion of the body. You may always count on the presence of these opposing sets of muscles. When in the process of stretching you first extend and then draw in the limbs, you rally or tensing both of the opposing sets in turn. For what purpose? Let us see. Nature's purpose in tensing the opposing muscles, in the above stated case, seems to be that of squeezing out something from the muscles. And that is exactly what it is, a squeezing out of something. Of what? Of the old, stale, weakened nerve force of physical magnetism. Why? To what end? To the end that the supply of fresh, vital, strong nerve force or physical magnetism may rush in to take the place thereof. This is equally true in the case of the brain exhaustion, nerve exhaustion, or muscle exhausting. For the brain cells, the nerves themselves, and the muscles are kept vitalized and invigorated by the same form of energy, coming from the same source. Moreover, the fresh supply of nerve force pouring into the muscles and cells, from the great nerve force reservoirs of the nervous system, leave the latter more or less depleted, and cause them to call for a fresh adequate supply from the universal source. In short, the stretching process sets into operation the whole machinery of the distribution of the system's supply of nerve force, and results in the whole nervous mechanism being given new impetus. This is the secret of the personal magnetism adept's method of distributing a fresh supply of physical magnetism, or nerve force, to all parts of the system, at will, thus rendering himself a veritable dynamo of physical magnetism, if he so desires. But there is more to this method of the student than mere ordinary stretching, I assure you. The ordinary stretching is simply an elementary form of nerve force distribution. I shall call your attention to an extension of, and improvement upon, the elementary method. You have probably heard of that of calisthenics, generally known as the tensing exercises. Well, in that system you may find the seed of a much more efficient system. The tensing system of calisthenics is taught for the purpose of exercising the muscles. Only this and nothing more. It has been found to bring about the greatest results, and to greatly develop the muscles and benefit the general system. Why? Oh, just exercise, replies the physical culturist. But we know better, for while we realize the benefit obtained from these sensible exercises alone, we also understand how such a rational course of exercise must result in greatly invigorating the entire system by distributing the nerve force, and as a consequence bringing about the absorption of a fresh supply to the great reservoir centers of the nervous system. Do we not? We have 3 decided points of advantage over the tensing exercise school as follows. 1. We precede our tensing exercises by rhythmic breathing exercises, thus bringing to our reservoirs a fresh supply of magnetism or nerve force. 2. We proceed leisurely and almost lazily, our idea being that of stretching as opposed to the idea of vigorous exercise by tensing, the latter being held by the tensing exercise school. And 3. We understand the real reason for the tensing, and hence are able to apply it intelligently instead of in a hit-or-miss style. The addition of the rhythmic breath, of course, gives a new and novel impetus to the work of nerve force distribution. In fact, the latter cannot be perfectly performed without the former. This the ordinary tensing exercise practitioner almost entirely misses, except insofar as he becomes fatigued by his vigorous exercise and is forced to breathe rhythmically, as a consequence, thereby unconsciously obtaining at least some of the benefits of the rhythmic breath. The ordinary tensing exercise student, once given our key of the rhythmic breath, is enabled to attain results impossible to him before. He sees a great light. As a consequence, my students of personal magnetism proceed about the exercises for distribution of nerve force or physical magnetism in an entirely different manner from that of the ordinary practitioner of the tensing exercise systems. The latter work themselves into an exhausted condition under the belief that their muscles will become better developed by such vigorous exercise. As a consequence, many of them wear out as much as they acquire of muscular development. My students instead pursue anything but a strenuous course of exercising in tensing. Instead of moving vigorously, they proceed slowly, calmly, and almost lazily in tensing the muscles, in turn extending and then drawing in. They keep before them all the time nature's own processes of stretching and model their movements entirely upon the same. In this way, as a consequence, there is no exhaustion or using up of nerve force or tissue to any marked extent, but on the contrary, there is a constant taking in and distribution of magnetism from the centers to the parts, and consequently a marked increase in vigor, vitality, and vim. The difference can be understood perfectly only when one practices my exercises for himself or herself. Finally, it follows that a much greater effect is obtained by one who practices any form of exercises understandingly, and with full knowledge of the why, as well as the how of the thing, of the theory as well as the practice. When one knows just what he is about, and just what he wishes and expects to obtain, then he has gained half of the battle. Lacking this knowledge, he wastes energy and effort, and does much that had better be left undone, while leaving undone much that should be done. Verily, knowledge is power in this case, as in many others. It is somewhat amusing, though sad, to see these tensing exercise people using themselves up in vigorous exercising, and at the same time losing 9/10 of the benefits gained by those practicing the lazy stretching exercises, accompanied by the rhythmic breath, as taught to my students. Chapter 8. Nerve Force Exercises. I shall now instruct you in the direction of certain forms of exercise designed to generate nerve force, or physical magnetism, both in the phase of absorption and that of distribution, according to the general principles set forth in the preceding chapters. Absorption. The exercises themselves are designed to give a free and full distribution to the nerve force or physical magnetism, but the student must always remember that before the nerve force may be distributed, it must first be absorbed. The absorption, of course, is performed by means of the breath rhythm, according to the instruction already given you. Important. Remember that every series of distribution exercises must be preceded and followed by the practice of the rhythmic breath for a few moments. It will also be found beneficial and useful to interject a short period of rhythmic breathing in between these exercises from time to time. You will soon discover the need of this from your own feelings. After you have gained familiarity and ease in practicing the distribution exercises, you will find yourself becoming very sensitive to the inflow of the nerve force during the breath rhythm exercise, and in a short time will know by your feelings exactly when you need to absorb more nerve force during the exercise. At this point, I wish to again remind the student that one of the main features of my nerve force exercises is that of the entire absence of artificiality and the presence of naturalness. I do not give set forms of breathing to be practiced just so often, for so many minutes at a time. Instead, I give the general principles of the method, the why as well as the how, and then bid the student to be governed entirely by his own instincts in the matter of the duration of exercises and frequency of the same. After a short time, the student will fall into the natural habit, just as he does into the habits of eating and drinking, and he will know exactly when he should practice nerve force generation and how long he should continue the exercises. Keep the words "be natural" before your mind and you will make no mistake. Never overdo the exercises or force yourself to perform them when you do not feel like it. Avoid anything approaching artificiality in the matter. Sometimes you may go a long time without practicing, and again you may feel the need of the same very often. In either case, follow nature's urgings. Again, you may feel like taking but a moment's exercises at a time, like taking a sip of water, while on other occasions you will feel like taking a long spell of exercise, like taking a deep draught of water when you happen to be very thirsty. Follow nature in both instances. Stretching exercise. I will begin by calling your attention to a form of exercise which consists of intelligent, simple stretching, but which form of exercise will be found very beneficial. There are a variety of forms of this exercise. I will give you a few general forms, and you may then enlarge on these and invent combinations, variations, etc. Lying on your back, extend your arms upward over your head to their full extent. Stretch them out easily but thoroughly as far as they will go. Then slowly pull them in. Repeat several times. 2. Stretch the arms sideways from the body, out and then in several times. 3. Stretch the legs in the same way several times. IV. Stretch the neck several times. V. Stretch the hand and fingers by moving the hands backward and forward from the wrist, clenching and unclenching the fist, opening and closing the fingers. 6. Stretch the feet and toes in the same general manner as in the case of the hands and fingers. 7. Turn over and lie on your stomach, with the face down on the pillow or floor, and repeat the above exercise in this position. This will bring into play a number of muscles not employed in the former position. A8. Rise to your feet and stand with the legs spread out, the feet several feet apart, with arms extended upward and outward. This will bring your body into the general shape of the letter X. Then rise to your toes and stretch upward as if you were trying to touch the ceiling. Repeat several times. You will be surprised at the feeling of rest and renewed strength, which will come to you as the result of the practicing of the above simple stretching exercises. And yet, simple as they are, these exercises perform a great work. You must not lose sight of the fact that when you tense these muscles, in the act of stretching and then contracting the limbs, you really squeeze out the old, worn-out, depleted magnetism and absorb in its place a fresh supply of vigor, vitality, and vim from the great reservoirs of the nervous system. Carry in your mind the idea of the sponge, which in order to absorb fully a supply of fresh water, must first be thoroughly squeezed out. The process of the absorption and distribution of nerve force is very close indeed to the process of the squeezing out and refilling of the sponge. The following tensing exercises are really but an extension of the stretching exercises, more elaborate and complicated, but embodying the same principle. They are useful in energizing the several parts of the body which are not actively energized by the simple stretching exercises. Shoulders and chest. Stand erect, feet close together, arms at sides. Then draw forward your shoulders as far front as they will go. Hold the position a moment, and then slowly press the shoulders back as far as they will go. This will tend to energize the shoulders and chest. The chest may also be energized by taking a few deep, full breaths, which will inflate the lungs and thus extend the chest. The shoulders may also be energized by raising them upward in a shrug and then slowly lowering them to original position. Arms, wrists, and hands. Any simple exercise which will extend and then contract the arm muscles will serve to energize the arms. Twisting them first one way and then another will do likewise. Twisting the wrist and moving the hands loosely backward and forward from the wrist tends to energize several very important muscles and nerves in this part of the body. Clenching and unclenching the hands will energize the hands and fingers. Spreading out the fingers fan shape and then drawing them together will energize the fingers thoroughly. Legs, feet, and toes. Follow the general idea of the arm and hand exercises just mentioned in the case of the legs, feet, and toes. Squatting energizes the thighs. Raising up the toes and then lowering to original position energizes the calves of the legs. The standing still run is a good general leg energizer. Neck. Move the neck forward as far as it will go, then backward as far as it will go, then sideways to the right as far as it will go, then to the left in the same way. Then twist to the right as far as it will go, then to the left in the same manner. These are splendid neck energizers. There are important nerves running through the neck, which are energized by these exercises, twisting and bending. What may be called a twisting of the different parts of the body serves to energize the parts very well indeed. In the same way, bending exercises are good. Not only may the legs and arms be twisted easily and effectively, but the entire trunk of the body may be equally effectively twisted by standing erect with feet, say 8 or 10 inches apart, toes out, and arms hanging easily by the sides. Then easily twisting the body to the right, the neck, trunk, and thighs being carried as far as they will go. Then twisting to the left in the same manner, repeating several times. Bending the body to the right, then to the left, then forward, then backward, is a good energizer, in a nutshell. The foregoing exercises might be elaborated into a book by itself, but what's the use? I have given you in a nutshell the main elements of the exercises, and you may do the elaborating yourself. In fact, I can sum up the general principles of the exercises in 3 words, viz., stretching, twisting, and bending. Think over these 3 words, and you will see that if you will apply them in every possible way to the various parts of the body, you will have a whole system of tensing exercises at your command, without purchasing expensive textbooks on the subject. And also, Remember that in any and all of the so-called tensing exercises, systems is to be found the best possible principle of nerve force distribution. Always, however, remembering to include the rhythmic breathing according to my previously given instructions. Now get to work and exercise your ingenuity in devising variations and combinations of the stretching, twisting, and bending principles. This will energize your mind as well as your body. Energizing the solar plexus. The solar plexus lies exactly behind the pit of the stomach. It may be energized by practicing a drawing in of the abdominal muscles. This may prove a little difficult at first, but a little practice will make perfect. Draw the abdominal muscles inward and upward several times at each exercise. The sacral plexus. The sacral plexus is another important plexus or great center of nerve force. It is located in front of the lower part of the spinal column, in the region of the hips. It may be energized by a special stretching, bending, and twisting of that particular region of the body. In case of impaired vitality or general weakness, a little extra energizing of these two plexus may be found very advantageous and beneficial, as they directly affect large regions of the body and important organs. Chapter 9. Projecting Nerve Force. At the beginning of Chapter 4, I stated that the physical phase of personal magnetism depends upon two coordinated manifestations of nerve force, namely, 1. The generation of nerve force, and 2. The conscious projection by the will of that supply of nerve force into the personal atmosphere, and even to a greater distance under special conditions. I have instructed you regarding the phase of nerve force generation. Let us now consider the second phase, that is, that of the projection of the same. Of all of the mental forces of the individual, the will is the most powerful, and at the same time the one least understood. It is hard even to define the will. Enough for our purpose to realize that it is the power within the mind whereby man is able to do things. Not only does man do the ordinary things of life by means of the will, but also he is able to do some extraordinary things when he learns how. The old occultist fully realized the mighty power of the will of man, and their teachings convey some very valuable information on this subject. One of their teachings was that by the use of his will, man is able not only to project thought waves from his mentality, but that he is also able to consciously project his physical magnetism or vital energy in the same way. The discoveries of the most advanced students of the subject in our times verify the old teachings of the occultists in this respect. The system I am herein teaching is therefore based not only on the advanced discoveries of modern science, but also upon the world-old teachings of the ancient occultists. Truth knows no special age or time. It is the property of the ages. The average man projects his physical magnetism or nerve force into his personal atmosphere or aura more or less unconsciously, just as he walks or breathes, for that matter. He has naturally acquired the habit and does not concern himself about the matter. In fact, he is usually unconscious of and ignorant of the process itself. The differences in the degree of physical magnetism projected or radiated by such persons is determined solely by the degree of nerve force generated by them, in absence of any special power of projection. There is a second class, however, the members of which, while not fully informed of their power to project physical magnetism, nevertheless, by their habitual use of the will in the direction of impressing others, powerfully, though unconsciously, direct waves of the nerve force outward, so that their personal atmosphere becomes well charged with it, and their influence is felt by those coming in contact with it. In this class of individuals will be found the active, energetic, masterful men in various walks of life, who direct others rather than are directed by others, who give orders rather than receive them. These men generally radiate enough physical magnetism to make itself felt by those with whom they come in contact, and are generally felt to be strong men. But even these persons do not manifest the greatest amount of physical magnetism. The third class of persons is that composed of individuals who have acquired a greater or less knowledge of fact that physical magnetism may be projected beyond the limits of the brain or body, and who have learned, at least in a degree, the art of so projecting it by the use of the will. These individuals range from those who have acquired merely a glimpse of the truth, up by degrees to those who may be spoken of as masters of the art. This last-named class of persons are those whose power is readily felt and acknowledged, and who leave their impression upon those who come in contact with them. The projection of the physical magnetism by the will is, in a way, a very simple procedure, consisting of two processes, as follows. 1. The belief in or realization of one's powers to so project the force, and 2. The actual willing or commanding the force to be projected. At first it may seem somewhat strange to learn that belief has anything to do with this matter, but a little consideration will explain this general law of psychology. It is this way. The will never acts in a direction which the mind believes impossible. One never tries to reach the moon because his mind refuses to believe that he can do it. But the child, believing that it is possible, will use his will to move his hand in that direction. The disbelief acts as a brake on the will. Do you see the point? But you may say the belief of the child does not enable him to reach the moon. Certainly not, but it caused his will to operate so as to move the hand. Belief does not necessarily render accomplishment certain, but it removes the barriers of disbelief, the latter preventing any accomplishment by the will. There are many things that we would be able to do if we could only believe that we could do, but disbelief acts as a brake and a barrier to the efforts of the will. Realization of one's power will often gain half the battle of accomplishment for him. In the case before us, the one needs only to believe enough to make the attempt. Then, each time the attempt is made and one perceives a result, the task becomes easier for the next time, and at last the sense of full realization of the power of the will dawns upon the person, and after that the rest is easy. The second process, that is, the actual willing or commanding by the will, is simply what the words actually say. How can you will or command the physical magnetism to move into your personal atmosphere and energize it? Will it obey me, you ask? Certainly it will, and the willing or commanding is simply effort the same that you employ, instinctively, when you will or command that your hand be raised. What makes the hand rise? It has no power to raise itself, neither have the muscles any such power in themselves. It is only when you will it to move that things begin to move. The mere willing sends a current of nerve force over the nerves and into the muscles, and the hand rises. Sounds simple, doesn't it? And yet it is one of the most wonderful things in the world. Only we have grown so accustomed to it that we fail to note the wonder of it all. The command of the will to the physical magnetism acts in the same manner as the command of the will to the hand. Now, right here is a point to be remembered. You do not merely say to the hand, "Raise up." Try it on your own hand. Say to it, "Raise up," without actually willing it to rise, and nothing happens. It is only when you accompany the command with the mysterious effort of the will that movement occurs. I cannot tell you how to move your hand by willing. All that I can say is that you must will it to rise, and you will understand exactly what I mean. Well then, will the physical magnetism to flow out into your personal atmosphere, just as you will the hand to rise, and the thing happens. But, you may say, you can see the hand move, and know whether your command has been obeyed, while you cannot see the physical magnetism flow. Certainly, but you can feel the magnetism flow, and thus be certain of it. The flow of physical magnetism soon becomes perfectly apparent to a person, and he is as certain of his radiation as he is that he is radiating heat on a warm day. It is one of those things which cannot well be explained, but which is readily understood by those who experience it. Try it yourself, and you will soon become conscious of the flow of nerve force from you into the field of your personal atmosphere or aura, to a distance of several feet on all sides of you. You will become aware of the effect of your physical magnetism upon others who come in contact with you. You will be able to perceive the reaction and response to your strong magnetic influence on them. They will unconsciously let you know that they feel the power of your presence and acknowledge your strength. You will find a puzzled expression on the part of some of your old acquaintances and associates who will be dimly conscious that there is something different about you, which they cannot explain satisfactorily to themselves. Do not, however, make the mistake of informing them, for this will invite unpleasant comment and criticism, and will also tend to make persons assume a defensive attitude toward you, and even an offensive one perhaps, in self-protection. You will also become aware of the healing and strengthening effect of your magnetism upon delicate and sick persons who come in contact with you. Such persons will feel strengthened by your presence and will dislike leaving you. You may experience some difficulty in preventing them from attaching themselves to you and seeking to live on your magnetism. But when you learn the art of using the mind force, or mental magnetism, you will be able to shake them off when necessary. In the meantime, you may do much good by giving these persons magnetic treatments, either by consciously directing a stream of magnetism towards them, by the use of the will, or by the use of the hand. Your magnetism will flow freely out of your hands and will invigorate weak persons, tend to remove painful conditions, etc. A little experience will make you a magnetic healer, if you should so desire. In this matter of handshaking, you will notice strange things. Persons who take your hand will be impressed by something strange and powerful about you, for your magnetism will flow out toward them and through their body, sometimes in a most marked manner, but more often in an easy current. You may project your physical magnetism in a direct current, quite a distance from your body, by the simple effort of your will, when once you have learned the little points of practice by repeated trials. I shall not speak at this place of the use of the physical magnetism in connection with the mental currents, for that topic will be taken up in a later chapter, or chapters rather. But do not wait until that time to practice. Get to work and practice with the physical magnetism now, so that you will have it well in hand when you receive the higher instruction regarding the mental currents. Plant your feet firmly on each step of the ladder, then you will not slip when climbing. Do you see the point? In concluding this illuminating journey through the chapters of The Art and Science of Personal Magnetism, readers emerge not only with a heightened awareness of the intricacies that underpin charisma, but also with a toolkit for practical transformation. From the preliminary greeting that set the stage to the nuanced exploration of mental and physical poles, the narrative has woven together a tapestry of insights. As we reflect on the mental and physical phases, delve into the specifics of physical magnetism, and navigate the cultivation and distribution of nerve force, the cumulative effect is a comprehensive understanding of personal magnetism. The chapters stand as interconnected threads, each contributing to the fabric of knowledge that empowers individuals to project their magnetic energy authentically and influentially. With nerve force exercises serving as practical bridges between theory and application, readers are not only informed, but also equipped to embody the principles of personal magnetism. The concluding chapter, focusing on the art of projecting nerve force, propels readers into the realm of mastery, inviting them to radiate their magnetic potential and leave an enduring impact on their interactions and environment. In essence, this exploration is not merely a guide, it is an invitation to embark on a continuous journey of self-discovery and refinement. The principles laid bare within these chapters transcend the confines of a book, extending into the lived experiences of those who choose to embrace and integrate them. As readers stand at the conclusion of this literary odyssey, they carry with them not just knowledge but the transformative power to shape their personal magnetism and influence the world around them.